Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Black Lawyers Podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of interviewing again for a second time Miss Ebony K. Williams. Thank you for joining us again.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes. Black History Month, Ebony K. Williams, Betting on Black. I know we talked about her book in our first interview with her about 2 seasons ago. Um, it's been 2 seasons. A lot has happened.
My God, understatement of the century, right? So much has happened. So much has happened.
Yes, so much has happened. And obviously, people know you as a TV personality. We know that you are a TV judge. Obviously, you were on The Real Housewives with Bravo. But obviously, before all that, you were a practicing attorney. What was your main motivator in becoming a lawyer?
Sure. So a few things for me. I am a very proud first generation college graduate. So a few things that were motivating me to pursue higher education and very specifically a career in the law was legacy. Legacy was very, very important to me even before I knew what it was by definition or really even the concept. There was something, I think, cellular in me that understood the importance of being a daughter of the African diaspora, being a Black girl who would eventually be a Black woman in this world, and knowing that my liberation would often depend on my ability to free myself. And if I could free myself, I knew I had a responsibility to free others, even before I heard, I believe it's Toni Morrison's quote that says your job is to free others once you free yourself. Anyway, girl, I put all that together as like a 4 or 5 year old. And so time I got school age, literally kindergarten, I was very precocious, hand always in the air, one of very few Black kids in Southeast Charlotte. And teachers would actually say to me and to my mother, she should be a lawyer. I think that sounded very audacious to my mom and grandma maybe at that time, just because again we didn't come from a family background that was afforded higher education in that way. But I think it was very clear that I had a voice that was one of advocacy for my peers, for other students who looked like me and those that didn't, being a part of the bar, if you will, right? Being a practicing attorney, having the privilege to put that Esquire behind one's name. It meant that we had achieved a particular threshold.
With all that being said, I guess you kind of answer a little bit my second question. What is something or what is your biggest motivator or inspiration? Obviously, your people, your mother, your grandmother. Is there like a mentor or someone in this game, either on the journalistic side or on the lawyer side, that's been a mentor? Because sometimes I will hear people say, both the legal profession and in the media profession, it's hard to find mentors. Sometimes it feels like a crab in a barrel where people don't want to share information, or people don't want to help. So have you had anyone that's like motivated you, inspired you on either of your journeys or both of your journeys?
For me, plenty. Yeah. Now I want to give that specific meaning. So I could sit here and name a million attorneys, a million Black attorneys, a million Black women attorneys who wished me ill when I entered the profession.
Okay.
But I could also name you a handful who were exceptional. And I can be very specific, as local as when I started practicing, I was sworn into the North Carolina bar at the age of 23 years old in 2007. I was sworn in by a judge. Her name is Yvonne Mims Evans. She was one of the first Black female judges in Mecklenburg County.
Hmm.
I think she's a proud graduate of Duke University Law School, and I don't even hold that against her because I'm a Tar Heel. Anyway, and I had the privilege of going. I shared my story being bused to white schools and being
Hmm.
um, like a kind of low income kid, which I want to be clear, not all Black kids are low income kids. And I think that's very important. And a lot of what I love about the work that you do and hold the space for. We exist in a broad scope of socioeconomic stature, right? But that happened to be the one I grew up in. And Judge Evans, her daughter, uh, was my classmate. So it was through seeing my peers, fellow Black girl second grader, and realizing her mom was a whole sitting judge that made my vision, my long-term vision and goal for seeing myself as a part of this esteemed profession, more possible, more realized. So to literally put my hand on the Bible and be sworn into practice by Judge Evans, some 20 odd years later, was a tremendous privilege and pleasure for me. So Judge Evans was great. Uh, Bread and butter at the time, Black women of Mecklenburg County Bar Association, Tidy Hands, I think it was Tidy Baker at the time, and now she's Judge Hands in Charlotte Mecklenburg. Yolanda Trotman was fantastic. Rhonda Brooks, who shepherded me when I transferred from Big Law to the Public Defender's Office, and Rhonda Brooks literally held me by the hand and took me to what we called a shucket that day, but basically it's the file, and hey, this is how you add a case to the docket. Oh, you want a bond hearing, girl, you got to do that by hand. Really taught me the practice of law and what it is to practice law in Black skin and in the context of being a young Black woman at the time. And so I can give you a long list of haters, but I can also name some. Oh, for sure. And I think that lens is important, right? Because it's
Yeah,
easy. So we're human beings.
right.
So when you grow up with a narrative that says we're this powerful Black collective and we're unstoppable and we're Black girl magic and Black girls in the law and this and that, there becomes, I think, almost a romanticized expectation that
Hmm.
every person you see that looks like you is for you. And I'm here to tell you, breaking news, it's not the case.
Right.
But if you got a Tayati, if you got a Judge Kim Best in Charlotte, if you got and one of my most magnificent teachers of the law and of the practice of the law and what it is to be a people's lawyer, is a gentleman by the name of James D. Butch Williams, who practices still to this day in Durham, North Carolina. And I was his associate for many years in Durham. Um, if you got a Butch Williams in your life, you're blessed. One can make a difference. So I do want to encourage listeners and maybe even law students or young Black lawyers to
Hmm.
don't worry about the haters. You're going to get them the rest of your life.
Right.
Um, Worry about acquiring one, two, if you're blessed, three that will um, hold you, challenge you, teach you,
Mhm.
and revere you for all the days. I still pick up the phone, 20 years later, and can call Butch about anything. And it's a phenomenal relationship that I'm very grateful for.
Well, something really beautiful that I don't think you realize with what you just said is that it's kind of full circle that you are now a judge. So many
Mm-hmm.
of your, it's
Mm.
almost like it planted a seed because when I was listening to all the people you were naming, a lot of them are actually judges. So I know
Mm-hmm.
they have a huge smile on their face when they
Yeah.
see you in this role now, which transitions me to the next question that we have. How is it? Because you have people that see you, see me, see
Mm-hmm.
others that are lawyers and in the media and on TV, and everybody thinks they can do it. Everybody thinks it's easy.
Mm-hmm.
How is it transitioning from being a private lawyer
Mm-hmm.
to a public figure on TV in any capacity? I mean, you're a judge, but you've done correspondent work, you've done host work, you've been a reality TV star.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a shock to kind of go from private lawyer to all of a sudden that because you're still a lawyer when you're on TV. People still hold you to a certain standard. So,
And let's be clear, we're still practicing arbitration. Like I love my peers, Miss Pat's judge show and Steve Harvey's judge show, but I can't speak on the mechanism of their shows. I'm not
mhm,
familiar enough, but I
mhm,
could tell you my colleagues on what we do with Entertainment Studios, Judge Lauren Lake, Judge Kevin Ross, Judge Mathis, Judge Maybelline. We're arbitrating. We're Judge Hatchett. We're arbitrating real cases. So we are like literally being held to a standard. We are still subject to the ethics,
mhm.
the rules, the governance of our respective bar associations. So no, it's a real thing, and I take it very seriously in that way. And also, what I so adore, and I feel so blessed and privileged and honored to be able to also be able to have the duality of the legal piece and the television piece, is we get to bring in that entertainment value. You know,
Hmm.
we get to bring in the levity, the laughter, the shits and giggles, for lack of a better term. But ultimately, I'll share with you what my co-executive producer of my show and all of Byron Allen's court shows, and she is the legendary Patricia Wilson, says, and that is our shows are our courtrooms are classrooms. Our
Hmm.
courtrooms are classrooms. And if you watch even one episode of, for instance, my show, Judge Ebony, you know, you're gonna get tea and shade and sarcasm and kiki,
Hmm.
absolutely, because that's innate in my personality.
Hmm.
And also, you're gonna maybe start to understand something about vicarious liability.
Yeah.
You're gonna start to understand something that maybe you may or may not be familiar with as it relates to um, contributory liability,
Negligence or something. Yeah.
negligence, responsibility, you name it. Yeah, and I'm not afraid to bring in the legalese because I do so much of the kiki and the giggles. Now I can slide in, you know, the terminology, the language, and those are points of power. So you might be watching an episode of Judge Ebony
Hmm.
and, you know, at the nail shop or at the kid's dentist appointment, and find yourself in a couple of months, you know, at a speeding ticket hearing or having, you know, whatever situation, custody hearing, you name it. And now you might just feel a little more comfortable in that courtroom, a little more familiar with the elements at play, because you have, even through just kind of osmosis, absorbed, um, I think, a system, and this is where it's really powerful and purpose driven for me, a system of so-called justice that we as Black folks are very aggressively gate kept out of
Hmm.
understanding.
Hmm.
So that has always been my most spiritual purpose as it relates to being a public figure
Hmm.
that you know has chosen a very front-facing aspect of combining law and media and television and broadcast. I always say, like, kind of, you don't have to go to law school because I did. Now, that's not literal. Many of y'all do need to go because we need to increase from being just 2% as Black women of
Yeah.
of lawyers in America, and 4%, 5% on a good day of Black people that are
Right.
lawyers. We must improve that number. If we're 14% of this nation, damn sure we need to be 14% of all lawyers at a minimum. But also, for those of you that do other important work in this world, which is so many of us, hopefully this is giving some foundational information as it relates to these systems.
Yeah, I believe Joya Deep told me, she says it's
Mhm.
called edutainment.
Yes.
Edutainment. She feels like
Yes.
not everyone does it, but she's like very few select shows actually do edutainment. And again, you guys are all real lawyers. I mean, I love Steve Harvey and Miss Pat and all that, but they did not go to law school. So
And
it's nice to see real lawyers on TV, real Black lawyers on TV mediating these cases and helping folks. What is something you wish you had known before you became a TV personality in any capacity, whether it
mhm.
be a judge, a host, or correspondent? Is there something that you wish you had known before?
Yeah, I will share this vulnerably. I wish I had known to protect myself more. And by myself, I mean my spiritual self. I mean my
Okay.
spirit. I wish I had known to protect my spirit a bit more and recognize that most of my colleagues, from the news space to certainly the reality TV show space, and even this kind of hybrid world I live in now, that most folks are really performing. And
Mm,
that's not with negative connotation necessarily. Like, I wish I had been a little less naive to the fact that once the camera or microphone goes on, there's a high performance level at play. And so I intellectually knew that, but I think spiritually I made an assumption that, like, everybody was bringing all of themselves and all of their true intentions and true heart and true selves to the work. And again, probably most heavy on housewives. Do I hold this regret?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, and not recognizing that for the vast majority of these folks, black, white, and other, gay, straight, and everything in between, men
Mhm.
and women, this is highly performative work. And even in their authentic execution of it, um, folks are not bringing all of that to it by and large. And
Mm.
when you choose, as I chose, especially early in the game, when I had a lot less autonomy. Now, see, with Judge Ebony and with Holding Court
Mhm.
with Ebony K. Williams, my podcast, I can bring all of the spirit self because I own the entities, especially with Holding Court. And even with Judge Ebony, I executive produce it. I'm, front facing on it. So I have much more power and control. But when
Mhm.
you're in an ensemble cast like Roni, or like you said, just a correspondent on HLN or CBS News or contributing at Fox News and all that, I was extraordinarily naive around just how much more pragmatic I
Mhm.
actually needed to be in protecting my spirit amongst peers that were operating in a much more two-dimensional capacity.
Mm.
Mhm. If that lands, if that
No,
lands.
it lands. I'm just, I think about my life right now. So when you use the word performative,
Mhm,
it's amazing how people, I hate to use the word pretend, but they can pretend to a certain extent, and
mhm.
then they do something that really reveals themselves, and you were like, wow, maybe
You
really.
just didn't account for it, and that's the difference. It's because people are going to do that. They're going to be how they are because and here's where there's compassion, right? They
Hmm.
must need to be that way, sis. They must
Hmm.
need to be that way. And guess
Hmm.
what? They get to make that choice, but then we get to make uh an autonomous choice as well. And
Hmm.
I believe that I was foolish, naive, and just literally uninformed as to this dynamic. And so
Hmm.
I was being very presumptive that
Hmm.
everybody's bringing their full spiritual, emotional, intellectual selves to the work and the space. And that cost me. That absolutely cost me. Mhm.
But you know what? My mom has a saying, lessons not learned are bound to be repeated. So as long as you learned
Absolutely.
the lessons,
Hmm.
then I think you're okay. Well, you seem to be doing okay.
Yeah,
You have
we figure these things out,
we
right?
figure these things out. You have an award-winning podcast. You have now a second season of your judge show. How does it feel to be a TV judge and going into your second season? Is this something that was maybe on your checklist, or was it just an opportunity that kind of presented itself?
You know, it feels good. Let me say that in this season where I think a lot of folks, especially that look like us, are looking for something to feel good about.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to just hold the space for the fact that um that's not a figment. That's not
Mm-hmm.
imaginative. This is a
Mm-hmm.
time where a lot is being called into question
Mm-hmm.
about our humanity and our dignity.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to say the good news is I feel real good. I feel real good. I feel real seen. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like this is the first time in my whole life certainly in my whole career between Judge Ebony and Holding Court that I feel I can really that that what's the saying? Your gifts make space for you or
Make
something.
this room for you. Yes.
That's it.
Yep.
Um, this is really what it looks like for the universe to make room for my gifts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we're really just getting started. I think everything up until this point, I think this is really important for, um, I want to say young people, but I don't mean that numerically. I mean young in your journey. You could
Mm-hmm.
be 55 and be a young person by the way in which I'm using this.
Mm-hmm.
I think I want to say that it took it 12 years. So I practiced law for 6, 7 years, just exclusively as a practicing, mostly criminal and family law attorney.
Mm-hmm.
I moved to LA in
Mm-hmm.
2010 to start a broadcasting career that primarily started in talk radio, actually, and then eventually landed into television and cable news and et cetera, et cetera. So here in 2025, this is representative of a minimum of a 12-year investment
Mm-hmm.
just in the broadcast piece, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I am just now, all of that was preliminary, to use a legal reference, just think of it as 12 years worth of preliminary hearings. 12 years worth of preliminary hearings. We are just now seating the jury. Like literally, literally. Season 1 of Judge Ebony,
Yes.
season 3 and 4 of Holding Court. We
Mm-hmm.
are just now at voir dire. Literally. Which is
Mm-hmm.
very exciting actually for me, right? Because I'm
Mm-hmm.
41. So that means, when I look at the other front piece that lies before me, we now can really get into the real business of my gifts and what I have for this world and my people, and now even my own daughter, which is very exciting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love how you broke that down. How many legal years? How many
Mhm.
broadcasting years? How many? Because again, sometimes when I am mentoring or when people, just inquire about what I'm doing or how I'm doing it, I'm like, this took years.
Literally.
Black, first of all, there was no Black Lawyers podcast. I found the domain.
Mhm.
I think it was the blacklawyers.com. No one had bought it. And I
Mhm.
didn't know what I was going to do with it. I just said, well, you know what? I'm just going to buy it. I mean, no one has it. Sometimes people domain set. And it was the pandemic that inspired me
Mhm.
to
Perfect.
do something, with all the racial things that were going on. And I said, well, I can't physically go to all these places, but I can, I can turn on a mic, I can interview those voices that count. And so it was years.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that like sometimes I think people think we just kind of just like jump up and do stuff. No, we've paid our dues, like you said, on both the legal side and the journalism side, and here we are. So we're definitely owed everything that we have now because we put in the work. So I encourage you, if you're listening to this, you're interested in being a practicing attorney, you're interested in being, a journalist, a host, getting into the media space,
Mhm.
there really are no skipping steps. Every once in a while, maybe you happen stance on an opportunity that maybe somebody else wouldn't get, but for the most part,
Mhm.
there's going to be years before you see any results. So
If
don't
I can
think,
be, if I can be provocative for one second,
sure,
Sid,
sure,
because this is very
this is why
important.
you're here.
This is right. This is very important what you're laying out, and
Hmm.
some people are probably hearing this and their eyes and ears are glazing over, because it's very. I think that guidance is very um kind of counter to what this current culture is selling,
Hmm.
right? And I write about this actually in my book Bet on Black, which is there is no bypassing the process.
Hmm.
And actually all the things that are going to serve you, and let me say this, serve others, yes, but we're all human beings. There's an element of self service that's important in this work, right? And in this process, the thing that's going to make it easier for you and better for you, a better lived experience for you when you finally get to what you want, is going to be the fact that you didn't bypass the damn process. I will prove it to you. So when I do Judge Ebony, so that tapes out in Los Angeles. I live in New York. I go out there for 4 or 5 days and we tape literally like 100 and I don't even know cases. We gang shoot it like most of these shows. That's what we do. And while I'm not gonna front, no cap, it's an intense workload, but I'm also a workaholic. No one will outwork me. But there is so much relative ease. I want to use that word, ease. Once I actually get on the bench, once we get out of glam, once we get out of pre-production calls with my team and my producers, and I know my cases, and I got my binders, and once I actually sit and take up my space on the bench, there is an element of ease at play. I am not nervous. I am not anxious. I am not stressed. I'm not looking for my words, trying to anticipate my judgment. I can just relax into now what is an extraordinarily fun, enjoyable, intellectually stimulating experience because I didn't bypass my process. And a lot of folks listening to this are a part of the D9, right? We're AKAs, we're Deltas, we're Zetas, we're SG Rows, we Kappas, we Alphas, we're all of the good things. Or we're aspiring, perhaps, to be a part of these esteemed organizations. And for the most part, and for the record, we're all non hazing organizations, very important. But for the most part, we all pride ourselves on some sort of process. Whatever your process was to get to your letters, to get to your positioning in the social order of Black legacy, we are proud of it. So let us be consistent, is what I would say to this. You proud of your process, whatever it took for you to get to be a soror, whatever it took for you to be frat, right? And we hold that pride all the days of our lives. It's the beauty of the D9, right? Lifetime membership, lifetime of service. Let us be as prioritized, let us be as preoccupied with the process of this professional piece. And I just want to have people sit with that. Mm-hmm. Don't bypass the
Absolutely.
process. Yeah,
Absolutely. Because becoming a lawyer, it's a process. You don't
yeah.
jump up and get into law school. You don't jump up and finish law school. You don't jump up and finish the bar. It's a
No.
process. So
And
all of
then
these
once you
things,
get that, you don't jump up and be a great lawyer.
yeah,
It's called the practice of law for a reason.
reason.
And then the TV piece, girl, forget about it. I mean, that
Uh,
is, as you
that
know,
that's
that
even
is
more.
right.
It could
So
be, and that's I think at least with law school, there's somewhat of a straight line. Like I do this step, I do this step, I do this
right.
step. With TV, it could just be an opportunity. You never know, or you could be competing with a role. Like it's definitely not a straight
It could
line.
be regressive,
Yep.
there's been times and years and projects where it's like you watch that tape back, you know.
Right.
Um, but the point is stay in your process. And just like
Absolutely.
whenever you came out or had your luncheon or your probate or whatever it was, and you were proud that you finished your process, apply
Mm-hmm.
that same sense of integrity to
Mm-hmm.
this piece of it. Don't keep wishing for your overnight YouTube success. Shout out to YouTube. Very important.
Right, because they're making
Right.
a lot of
Very
money over
important.
there, but
Listen,
everybody
very
can't do that.
important. Very
Everybody can't do
important.
that. Yeah.
And very important. And also there is even a process there, as we know, right?
Mm-hmm.
So are you doing your reps? Are you consistently dropping content? Are you so yeah, I just if nobody don't take shit from what we talked about today
Right.
from me, lean into the power of the process.
Yes.
The
Lean into it
process.
and respect it. Lean into it and
Yeah.
respect it and
Yeah.
know that anybody that you've seen successful has gone through that process. Um, if someone has not watched an episode yet of the Judge Show and they want to tune in, I think they already know maybe somewhat of your personality, maybe from other things. But how
Yeah.
are you as a judge? Are you good cop, bad cop, a little bit of both?
I'm tough love cop, I would say.
Okay, tough love cop.
As Judge Abbott. Yeah, like listen, and this actually goes back because I didn't fully answer one of your previous questions, which was kind of like, was being a judge kind of on my vision board, or was it something
Hmm.
that I had a wish? And the answer is not directly, and I'm kind of ashamed as to my why. I always, like many young Black kids, grew up with Victor Newman, Price is Right, and The People's Court. Okay, let's be clear. Okay. And so always been a fan of the genre, in reverence of the genre. And truly we all know The People's Court is the first reality TV show. We think of it as Real World. It really was The People's Court. That was the first time we saw real actual people on the TV for our entertainment purposes. So I've always loved the genre and revered the genre of the court daytime show. But there was an error, at least for me, where I felt that most of the court shows, not all of them, but most of the court shows, I'm talking about the 90s and maybe the going into the early 2000s, where I felt like we as Black folks started to be um positioned as a mockery of sorts in the daytime court space, where it was a lot of everybody was a crackhead, everybody was a hoe, everybody was a baby mama, everybody. I mean, you laugh because you know exactly what I'm talking about. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I vowed early in my career, even as an attorney, but even more so once I decided to go onto this front facing TV thing,
Mhm.
I'm big on Harriet McDaniel, first Black woman to win an Academy Award for her role in Gone with the Wind. When she gives her Oscar acceptance speech and she talks about her hope that she is a credit to her race, right? That was big for me. That remains big for me.
Mhm.
So, what's the medicine rule, first rule, do no harm.
Mm-hmm.
I take that to what we do in television, sis. I think it's very important. But first, I would love to do some good, but let me first do no harm.
Okay.
So when I would think about myself having a judge show in early parts of my career, I would crush that dream. I would quail that dream. I would turn away from that dream because I didn't trust myself enough to be able to be in that space as a judge, as a black woman judge, and not participate in the um oppression, in the self-hate, in the compounded injury to black humanity in that genre. I didn't trust myself enough to do it. So when Byron and I had a call, which was just a general exploratory call, I don't think he'll mind me sharing this. It was just a, you know, you do big shit. I'm somebody who's in the space. Let's if there's synergy to do something together, we should discuss that. That was really the nature of it. And he said, kind of like, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I wouldn't be totally mad at a judge show, but it would have to be done a certain way, Mr. Allen. And he said, well, what's your way? And we kind of sussed it out. And he said, I'm willing to take a chance on that. I'm willing to take a chance on what you, in your most authentic capacity, looks like on that bench. That's not trying to be Judge Judy. This certainly is not trying to be the legend that is Judge Mathis. That's really just, and by the way, you're kind of young. And Byron named it, and this genre is not always welcoming to those of us who are under 60, 70 years old, because that's just the practice, right? Like, we're used to seeing the old white man on the bench, and at best the old black lady, quote unquote. Shout out to the legends. um so to be kind of like, I started the show at 40 on the dot, that was kind of disruptive. And are you going to be taken seriously? And I said, Mr. Allen, I want you to not worry about that. I want you to trust, as I now trust, my ability to have been around the hoop long enough in a variety of public television and media spaces to where I believe I'm not going to have to perform authority. I'm not going to have to act as if I'm the boss. Motherfucker gonna know who
Mhm.
courtroom they in when they
Yeah.
come into the
Yeah.
evidence
I was
courtroom.
gonna say
And they
with
do.
you, I'm surprised
Yeah,
he asked that because as if I was a producer trying to develop your show,
yeah.
I'm like, well, we're not gonna have an issue with authority.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I mean, it's like sometimes it is though, right?
Right,
So
because you're black, you're a woman, you're
yeah,
young, so
and
it's
young,
still
and we look
right,
even younger. So even though
right,
we might be in our late 30s or
right,
early 40s or
right,
whatever, we could look 30. We could
right,
look, you know.
right.
So
So it's
anyways,
like, but you
yeah.
command that respect.
Yeah, yeah. And that was an important piece of trust from Mr. Allen. Let me give him credit, because once he gave me that, it let me not feel any need to show up as anything other than what I am.
Mm-hmm.
And with that freedom, with that power,
Mm-hmm.
you get the show that people seem to be really enjoying. And I really have such great gratitude to my audience. And also, again, shout out to Patricia Wilson, my executive producer on the show with me, because we're very um, intentional around how we curate it. We represent all cultures, and we don't shy away from my authentic primary lens of Black womanhood. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to PC it and, okay, well, now we got to do this. No, 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 no. Like, for instance, I had a case, and it was a Black mother, and she had a Black daughter, and her daughter was in ballet class, classical ballet class, and it was time for point shoes. So many of us who grew up dancing
I
know where this is
dance.
going.
Yep.
Yes, yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
And she was the only little Black girl in her class, and all the other moms and little girl dancers were white. And this Black mother needed this white mom to pick her daughter up one day, as moms do for each other, right? And when
Mm-hmm.
she picked her daughter up, child, the white mama had used the makeup to make the girl point shoes Black skin color. And that Black mama brought her into Judge Ebony's courtroom and said, Your Honor, I want to be reimbursed for the full value of the gorgeous pink point shoes that I purchased for my daughter. And if you know anything about point shoes, we're talking about 100, 200, $300 at this point. It's very expensive. She said, because how dare she think it her place to try to color correct my daughter's point shoes. If anybody should be doing that labor, that work, having
Right.
that conversation with my daughter
Right.
around her othered identity as it is in the context of classical ballet, it is me.
Mhm.
So I won't spoil it for those who haven't seen the episode, but
Mhm.
that's the minutia in which we get into the colorism, the gender politics, the racial politics. We go there because that is my authentic experience.
I
Mhm.
love that episode. I'm gonna have to go back and watch it. I'm former
Yeah.
dancer. I did dance theater Harlem right in between
Ah,
high
there you
school and
go.
college, so I know all about having to have the skin tone tights and the
Yeah,
shoes and that whole process. So I
yeah,
will
trial and
definitely,
error and trying to get the shape
yes.
and yeah, child. It was a
I will
whole
definitely
stew.
tune into that episode. Thank you for that sneak peek of that episode
Yeah.
and how again it allows you to, any other judge,
Mhm.
maybe if it was a white female judge, that episode probably wouldn't go the same way.
Yeah.
So this
And
is
maybe if
why,
it was a black male judge, he'd be like,
right?
"Well,
It may be they may
he did
not
you
be
a
able to
favor."
relate, right?
Correct. But
And this
for
is
those
why
of
you
us who
have to have it.
yeah, we've sat on that hardwood floor.
Yes.
We know what it feels like to be otherized. And
Yes.
then to the white defendants, kind of human lens,
Hmm.
very much so in good faith, trying to be
Right.
helpful.
Maybe just didn't. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I was like,
Right.
ma'am, I want to acknowledge your
Right.
intention was good here,
Right.
and also, it is what it is.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
this is why when they say, oh, why do we have DEI efforts?
uh-huh,
We have
uh-huh.
to have, it's not about putting um
Quotas.
uh unaccomplished or people that don't have competency in roles in
Sure.
television and law and politics and whatever. No, no, no,
Mm,
you still have to be competent. You still have to be excellent, but it has to be diverse because if it's not diverse, we don't get those different perspectives. We don't get that different
correct.
understanding. And I
Mhm.
I know that's at the forefront of one of the many things with this new administration that people are thinking and talking about. But just quickly, I had to say that because I think that's a
Yes,
great representation of
say
why
that.
you can't just have men. You also have to have women. You can't just have white women. You have
Yes,
black women. It can't just be one because we're only going to get one perspective, one understanding.
correct. And
Yes,
even within the kind of shared experience of Black women in a certain era, we still have distinct experiences. So
yes.
it's really a powerful tool. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of moms and daughters, that's how we're going to close your interview. So I love
Yeah.
interviewing you because it's very easy to interview you. Like it just flows. I have my questions, but it always easy flows with you.
Yeah.
Um, we have we have your daughter and it was so funny because when I saw the People
Mhm.
magazine, I said, "Oh my God, she's doing it! She's doing it!"
Because we had
And
discussed.
I
Yeah.
was so excited for you. And we know your daughter's name is Liberty.
Yes.
Um, Tell us why you named her Liberty.
Yeah. So as I opened our conversation today with, I've always been very preoccupied by liberation
Hmm.
of myself and our people. But more specifically, when well, two things. Number one, no cap. I lived in LA for a period of time during my broadcast career, as I shared, and there was an Asian woman who was a meteorologist, I believe, and her name was Liberty Chin.
Mm.
I remember one day I was getting dressed and I said, Liberty Chin. Yeah. And I made a mental note that said, I don't know that I'll be a mom one day, but if I'm a mom one day, I want to put Liberty on my short list. And then fast forward many years, many, like 10, 12 years later. And I was reading the Washington Post and I came across a story. This was pre-Amazon Washington Post. Anyway, I came across a story that talked about how the origin story of the actual Statue of Liberty, as we know her here in New York, we think of her as a beacon for immigration, Ellis Island. Give us your weary, you're tired, you're poor. But what most of us don't know, and I didn't know until this recent occurrence, is that the actual Statue of Liberty originated first. She came from France. She's a gift to us from French architects and artists. And she originally was being gifted to the United States as kind of an acknowledgement, a celebration, a commemoration of our finally emancipation of the enslaved African. She was basically good job for doing the right thing from France to America. And in her original design element, there were these broken shackles. It was a whole lot of things. At first, at some point, she was actually oriented around an Egyptian woman, so literally an African woman around the Suez Canal, and then that changed, and then other things changed. But anyways, to this day, here's what's important. There are broken shackles if you go to the Statue of Liberty today, and you will see these broken shackles, and they are the last remaining imagery of the original design concept and intention, which again is to acknowledge the American emancipation of the enslaved African from France to the United States of America. And it was only like maybe 30, 40 years later that we put the poem on her tablet and all the other things. And we got this kind of more modern interpretation of the immigrant story. But the Statue of Liberty in its origin is actually around the celebration of the emancipation of Black people on this land. And I really wanted my progeny, my daughter, to have a moniker that reflected her choice. Now, my whole thing was you were born free because that was how I curated you. Your ability to remain free, young Liberty, will be up to you. So there it is.
Amazing story. And I just love it. And I'm not that I'm trying to put any more children on you, but if you decide to have a boy, you should name him Justice. Then you
Yeah,
have
I've heard just,
liberty, justice for all. I
yeah,
thought
yeah.
that would be so cute. I thought
That
about
would
that.
be so cute, and it's so not happening because girl, it's grand opening, grand closing over here. But that's very lovely. That is so lovely. It
I
really
thought of the names and I was like, oh, if
is.
she ever had a boy, she could name him Justice. And obviously you're an attorney. So there was that.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
yes, no, I think that's amazing that you have liberty and you know, as professionals, not just women, lawyer professionals, but I
Mhm.
think women that go into these heavily male dominated spaces. And I think you spoke on it briefly, and maybe another interview, just wanted you to touch on it just briefly here. But we do all this, like you said, we go through the process of school and bars and careers and things like that. And then you look up in your certain age, and
Yeah,
maybe you have not checked any of the personal check boxes. And again, everyone doesn't want to get married, and everyone doesn't want to have children. So this is for people that actually want to get married and or have children. So
yes.
if this does not apply to you, then you can tune out on this part.
Mhm.
But a lot of us want to achieve in our personal lives. And I know for myself, I'm getting up in age. And so when I saw you did what you did, I was like, well, Ebony's done it. So, I don't know how many people you think you may have inspired to consider that
Yeah,
journey,
yeah.
but I'm one of those people because, you see the baby pictures, you see people with their kids. And if you've always wanted to be a mom
Mhm.
and you haven't checked that box yet, and you haven't checked the box not really because it's your fault, right? You're maybe you're not married yet. Maybe you haven't met the person that you
Sure.
feel like you would even
Raising a
want
child with.
to
Yeah,
have a child with. Maybe they're
yeah.
just the candidates are not eligible. So
Mhm.
what do you do? Do you just deny yourself being a mom because you can't do it
The way that you,
the right, I want to put right way in
sure.
quotes. So did you struggle with quote unquote doing it a different way? I mean, did your mom, did your grandmother, were they like, are you sure you want to do it this way? I mean, where were you in your decision, and what is your advice for someone that's maybe considering this because maybe they are 35 plus in a male dominated field. They
Yeah.
haven't met the right one, but they still want to enjoy motherhood.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer extraordinarily candidly because I owe that to anyone listening to me.
Okay.
I'll start by saying my mother and grandmother, respectfully to them, were not factors. Only because I'm very big on Katie's my grandmother who's passed during COVID but had a great life. Katie lived her life. Katie made her choices. My mother Gloria lived her life and made her choices. So I have a nice strong boundary around Ebony's living her life and making her choices.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and it just so happened that grandma had passed and Gloria didn't have much pushback.
Mhm.
Um, I would say this. I have to acknowledge that my decision is, in retrospect, I'm able to say this, was largely influenced by the fact that I actually was married briefly in my
Okay.
late 20s.
Okay.
And I have to, generally, if you were to ask me what are my feelings about that, very brief, literally, it was like a year. I was like 27 when I got married. I was 28, divorced, and moved on. It was relatively amicable. It was just kind of a grand opening, grand
The
closing.
closing.
Yeah. And actually, let me share this. Speaking of checking boxes, I really only married that man who was a totally fine enough man.
Mhm.
Because I wanted to check that box. Because
Mm.
like so many women, Black women of our generation,
Mhm.
I'd seen and internalized, heavy on internalized, that dreadful Dateline episode that talked about the overeducated and perpetually single Black woman. Do you remember this?
Yeah, it's ringing a bell.
I think it was
Mhm.
Dateline, but maybe it
Mhm.
was Nightline.
It was a
Anyway,
special. Mhm.
it was a news special.
Mhm.
It permeated Black culture. It was in Jet magazine, Ebony, Essence. It was everywhere. There was this really strong narrative around how Black women at this time were killing it professionally. We were killing it academically. We were on the rise. We had our bags. We had our money. We were doing awesome. And yet we were absolutely undesirable. We were
Mm.
undateable. We
Mm.
were not getting married. We were not being mothers. We were men in skirts, as and we could talk about that on our third interview. And I remember, even I think I might have been in high school or something when this really hit the fan, and I remember being making a mental note like, won't be me. Note to self, at some point, secure the husband and the ring. As to not, I was always very preoccupied with being avoiding being a statistic of any kind.
Mhm.
And this was coming really from a place of insecurity now that I'm an adult and I can recognize it. I didn't want to be a teenage pregnant mom. I didn't want to be one of these now kind of demonized, villainized, barren, educated woman. I was very much running away from dramatic, stereotypical versions of Black womanhood. So I ended up getting married in my late 20s, simply, really, truly, because I was deathly afraid of living up to that stereotype that said that the cost of being a Black woman with ambition, the audacity to educate and earn, meant that you were assigned loneliness and destitute. So that really is what led to my very brief short-term marriage. Um, Coming out of that marriage, I was able to say a few things for sure. While I am a woman, I'm a heterosexual woman. I love love. I love the right companionship. Being somebody's wife, because I actually was one for a moment in time, didn't do for me what I thought it would do for me. That's not to say totally against it forever, but it was a really good piece of information, you know. In the same way that I've had escargot. Have you had escargot before? What'd you think?
Yeah, it wasn't for me. I've
Just kind
had
of
it.
all right, right?
Right, right.
That's
But
how I felt too.
yeah,
But aren't we glad we had it? So
right.
that when we go
We
to
have a
a
chance.
restaurant, I like y'all are laughing, but I'm being very serious. This is good
No, it's true.
information. So now we're not. The point is I don't romanticize
Right.
what it is to be a wife, what it is to be married, what it is to walk through the world with someone else's last name or the ring on my finger. And of course, we know true commitment and love is much deeper than all of these
Right.
things. But
Right.
I would not be being honest if I did not acknowledge that for some of us, these cosmetic components are
Mhm.
factors because we are socialized
Yeah.
individuals.
Yeah.
So fast forward to Liberty and my decision to go about pursuing single motherhood by choice, I had the benefit of coming into this decision knowing, you know what? I actually was married. I actually was on the path to doing it the quote right way. And in that experience,
Mhm.
I was able to just that quickly identify massive things that I was not interested in doing with a husband, and in particular that husband. So for me, I was able to identify with information some preference. There were some things about single motherhood that were actually preferential to me, which I know is very um kind of not necessarily what people would expect someone
Right.
to say, right? Like a
Mhm.
lot of people, I think, frame this as a worst case scenario, a
Mhm.
doomsday scenario, a last resort. I
Mhm.
can honestly say for me, that was not my experience.
Mhm.
Having been married and divorced, having had multiple relationships after, like serious long-term ones.
Mhm.
I had an engagement that I
Right.
ended during the pandemic, which I've talked about publicly. Um, this was actually a very affirmative choice for me to say, you know what? I want to be a mother. I'm blessed to feel I can execute motherhood in a way that I think will be of service,
Mhm.
tremendous service to a child. And I actually embrace and prefer to have executive decision making around my motherhood journey. So
Mhm.
that is my truth.
Mhm.
This is not a new world order. This is not the new way Black women should mother. This is not the way Black children should be born
Mhm.
in mass. This is simply, and I love the way you said it, an option for
Mhm.
some women. And by the way, some men as well, both
Mhm.
straight and queer. This we are at a place where science and society have made just a little bit of space for
Right.
those of us who find ourselves running up against a biological clock,
Mhm.
and also resourced. And I don't just mean the money, but the money does matter. I don't
Yes.
care who says otherwise, they're lying.
Yes.
um Resourced, and also have done much of our emotional work, right, to
Mhm.
position ourselves to parent. And none of us, although we might be single moms or single dads by choice, know there's community. No, there
Mhm.
is tremendous community,
Mhm.
including men. There's a whole, and you know some of these men,
Mhm.
there's a whole group that are called the Men of Liberty. My
Mhm.
daughter has a complete male, Black male community that receive her, that love on her, that guide her, teach her. This is very important. So I just want to encourage anybody who's thinking about it to do that. Think about it, consider it, do the
Mhm.
research, do the
Mhm.
thinking, do the praying. And also know that, and I want to just end with this.
Mhm.
This is not, I would not recommend this for any woman specifically that is still deep in her grief about the fact that this would be your particular motherhood journey, because this is amazing. This is the best choice I've ever made. And this is extraordinarily difficult. Extraordinarily difficult. That, when it's 3 in the morning, it's just me and Liberty. It's me and Liberty. When it's, you know, whatever it is, it's just me and her, right? And I say that because I have girlfriends who I think see how effective this has been for me and how much joy it has brought me. And I think they're like, maybe I should do that. And I'm like, I actually do not think this would be a good option for you. And let me tell you why. Because I think you are still deeply brokenhearted, that your preferred way of building family has not presented itself yet. And you are starting to grapple with it might not show up for you ever. And that is a grieving process that must take place before you even consider it. Because no child, no baby, no human deserves to be born to a mother who is brokenhearted in that way, if that makes sense.
I love that you say that. That is a good tip in terms of, I'm sure there's some other categories, but that's
Yeah, and y'all can
definitely
edit
great.
and condense that, but I needed
Yes.
to put that
Yeah,
out.
no, no.
Yeah.
If you're grieving, then yeah, you want to be, you want to carry the baby happy. You want to have the baby
Yeah,
happy.
yeah, girl.
They can
I
feel
wanted
all
it.
of it. They
Yeah.
can feel all of it. They're very sensitive creatures.
Yes.
And
Yes.
something I don't think you realize you said, but I'm gonna steal
Mhm.
it,
Please.
is you have to be the executive producer of your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like you're the executive producer of your podcast and your show for a woman that's listening, that's considering this.
Yeah.
If this is what you have decided, if you think this will bring you joy, if this is your only opportunity to become a mom, you are the executive producer of your life. You are
Mhm.
allowed to change decisions, make decisions, and pivot.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, yeah, no, no, I definitely think that is the way someone should look at it. That is definitely the way I will look at it moving forward. As I am one of these women that are, like you said, considering it as as an option moving forward. And I appreciate you being very transparent about that. I know you've given some interviews about it before, but I've never heard you answer the questions this way.
Mhm. Yeah, Black women deserve all of it. Like, the Christmas pictures and the cuteness and the People Mag, that's awesome. And that was that was me producing, right?
Right,
Like I want to tell another story of single Black motherhood. It's not
right.
always a story of despair. It's not
Mm-hmm,
always a story of poverty. It's not
mm-hmm,
always a story of last resort. And
mm-hmm,
also,
mm-hmm.
you really must want this.
Really must want this. Yes.
And all that comes with this.
And all that comes with it. Because, like you said, it's just you and Liberty at 3 a.m. There's no one
Yeah.
else. So don't forget that motherhood, even when you're married, is
And even
difficult.
when
Let
you're
her
married,
know
yeah, that's
up.
what I
Right.
hear too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not going to be easy either way. So yes,
Yeah.
hopefully someone took some gems with that. We
Yeah.
always end our episode with a Black excellence moment of the week. It is Black History Month. Our
Mm-hmm.
brother Benjamin Crump, a fellow attorney at law, just settled a huge lawsuit for Sonia Massey,
Mm-hmm.
$10 million lawsuit. Obviously, I want them to get as much as they can get.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I would want even more than 10 million, but he was
Sure.
able to finally settle that. A Black woman who was killed
Mm-hmm.
by the police. And so we don't forget these women. We don't forget these stories. We don't forget the work. I know sometimes people just want to take a break and they don't want to hear certain stories. They don't want to hear certain updates, but these things are still going on. So
Absolutely.
shout out to Attorney Benjamin Crump for still doing the good
Yeah.
work. He is our Black Attorney General, as they call him.
Absolutely.
And as he told me, he says the more they have to pay, the more they'll get it. They only understand
They only
dollar
understand.
and cents. They
That
only
is just
understand.
the reality. And for
Mhm,
those that don't understand, if you haven't seen it, go watch the Netflix documentary Civil.
mhm,
For those, actually, shout out to Remy Ma. I remember when I was co-hosting State of the Culture with Remy on Revolt years ago. We kind of got into a spirited conversation around where if you really were hurt, if you're really a victim, you should just pursue criminal justice, like in the criminal sector. And I really was able to take my time and walk my sister through the valuation of a civil option and
mhm,
why it is as legitimate as anything else to say, no, we must be paid for our suffering.
mhm.
And what Ben has done, to your point, and he's had a few of these history
Yes,
making
yes.
judgments, he is literally in real time, y'all. I really want y'all to get this. He is literally exacting a valuation that is extraordinarily high
Mhm,
around Black life. So if we're talking about Black lives mattering and
mhm,
we really want to be grown up about it,
mhm,
things that matter have a price assigned. They
mhm,
just do. Your house, it's a reason you got an appraisal.
mhm,
Okay? If you're a luxury girl and you go to the
mhm,
real or something, they gonna tell you how much the bag can sell for, right?
mhm,
So let's not be naive. There
mhm.
is absolutely a valuation on every assigned life. And what Ben has been able to do is literally in real time, in our generation, elevate the assigned quantum value of Black life. And it is remarkable and it is historic and it is to be celebrated. So I'm so glad
Yes,
you're naming that.
yes, yeah, definitely. He also has the Malcolm X suit that,
Hmm.
you know, he's going after them for him being killed. So Ben is
Absolutely.
not playing. Ben
No.
Ben is not playing, and we are fortunate to witness these historic suits in our
Yes.
lifetime. Ben, keep going. Ebony,
Yes.
you have been such a gem, such a
Yes.
pleasure.
Thank
You have
you.
a lot of fans on this podcast, so they enjoyed you the first time. They're like, "When are you gonna have Ebony back?" I'm like, "Let me shoot her an email." So happy to have you back. Happy to have you back in the future. As always, we are rooting for everyone, Black everyone. Take care.